Hello and welcome to Wisdom Forge. How daily stress secretly creates chronic depression, the scary truth. The insidious transformation from stress to depression. What begins as normal everyday stress can quietly evolve into clinical depression through a series of gradual changes in your brain and body. Each stressful day acts like a single thread in a heavy rope, seemingly insignificant alone but collectively powerful enough to pull you downward. The transition happens so slowly that most people don't recognize the shift until they're already deep in depressive symptoms. Your brain's stress response system becomes stuck in overdrive, altering your neurochemistry, thought patterns, and even your physical health. This isn't simply feeling sad, it's your entire system becoming rewired by persistent stress until depression takes hold. Your brain's exhausted alarm system. Chronic daily stress keeps your amygdala, the brain's danger detector, constantly activated, like a car alarm that won't turn off. This perpetual state of alert floods your system with stress hormones that were meant for short-term emergencies. Over time, this exhausts your neural pathways, making it increasingly difficult to experience calm or pleasure. Your brain becomes trained to expect threats everywhere, jumping at shadows and interpreting neutral events negatively. This neurological exhaustion creates the perfect conditions for depression to flourish, as your brain loses its ability to regulate emotions effectively or find joy in ordinary life. The chemical drought in your brain. Prolonged stress creates a neurotransmitter crisis in your brain, depleting the chemicals responsible for happiness and stability. Serotonin, which regulates mood and contentment, becomes dangerously low. Dopamine, which drives motivation and pleasure, dwindles to a trickle. Norepinephrine, which helps with focus and energy, drops precipitously. This chemical imbalance isn't something you can simply snap out of, it's a physical change in your brain's operation that makes depression inevitable. Your neural pathways literally reshape themselves around this deficiency, making negative thinking your brain's default setting and positive experiences harder to process. When sleep stops healing you. The sleep disturbances caused by ongoing stress create one of depression's most vicious cycles. Initially, stress makes it hard to fall asleep as your mind races with worries. Over time, you lose the ability to stay asleep through the night or reach the deep, restorative sleep stages where emotional processing occurs. This sleep deprivation then amplifies every other depression symptom, intensifying negative moods, sapping energy, and clouding thinking. Your exhausted brain becomes trapped in a self-perpetuating loop where stress ruins sleep and lack of sleep worsens stress responses, accelerating your slide into depression with each passing night. The mental rut of negative thinking. Daily stress carves deep channels of pessimistic thinking in your mind, like rainwater eroding gullies in soft earth. Your thought patterns become automatic pathways leading to the darkest conclusions. You develop mental blind spots that filter out positive information while magnifying every negative detail. These aren't conscious choices but learned responses from your overtaxed brain trying to protect you by anticipating worst-case scenarios. The tragedy is that these thought patterns, originally meant to keep you safe, actually become prison walls that trap you in depression's darkness, making it increasingly difficult to imagine any other way of thinking. The slow poison of social isolation. As stress evolves into depression, you unconsciously begin distancing yourself from others, not out of dislike but from sheer emotional exhaustion. Social interactions start feeling like impossible demands rather than nourishing connections. You cancel plans, delay responding to messages, and withdraw from gatherings, not realizing you're cutting yourself off from the very relationships that could help buffer against depression. This isolation then feeds back into your condition, as loneliness amplifies negative thoughts and removes opportunities for positive experiences that might lift your mood, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of withdrawal and deepening depression. The paralysis of lost motivation. One of depression's cruelest tricks is robbing you of the drive to do things that might make you feel better. What begins as stress-induced fatigue gradually morphs into complete motivational paralysis. Tasks that once seemed simple now feel insurmountable, not because you've become lazy but because your stressed brain has depleted its reserves of willpower. This isn't a character flaw, it's a neurological reality where your overtaxed system can no longer muster the energy for basic functioning. The less you do, the worse you feel, and the worse you feel, the less you can do, trapping you in depression's grip. When your body joins the breakdown, depression doesn't just live in your mind, it manifests physically throughout your entire body. Chronic stress leading to depression causes unexplained aches and pains, digestive issues, persistent fatigue, and changes in appetite and weight. Your immune system weakens, making you more susceptible to illnesses. These physical symptoms often appear before the emotional ones, leading many people to visit doctors searching for physical causes when the root issue is depression. Your body and mind are engaged in constant communication, and when your brain is drowning in stress hormones, your entire physical being suffers the consequences. The thick fog clouding your mind. The cognitive effects of stress-induced depression create a mental fog that obscures your thinking like a heavy mist. Memory lapses become frequent, concentration requires Herculean effort, and your thought process is slow to a crawl. This isn't normal forgetfulness or distraction, it's your brain conserving energy by shutting down non-essential functions after being overwhelmed by constant stress. The harder you try to push through this fog, the more exhausted you become, creating frustration that feeds back into the depressive cycle. Many people mistake these symptoms for early dementia or other neurological disorders when they're actually signs of depression's impact on cognitive function. The emotional flatline of depression. One of depression's most disturbing symptoms is the gradual numbing of emotions until you reach a state of empty neutrality. Where once you felt joy, sorrow, excitement, or anger, now there's only a flat, featureless emotional landscape. This isn't peace or contentment, it's your nervous system's last-ditch effort to protect itself by shutting down all emotional responses after being overwhelmed by constant stress. The ability to cry when sad or feel excited about future events disappears, leaving you floating in an emotionless void that's often more terrifying than sadness itself because it represents the complete absence of feeling. False escapes that deepen the problem. In desperate attempts to relieve their suffering, many people turn to alcohol, drugs, binge eating, compulsive shopping, or other quick fixes that provide temporary relief but ultimately worsen depression. These coping mechanisms create additional problems that compound the original issues, digging the hole of depression ever deeper. What begins as an attempt to self-medicate becomes another source of stress and shame, feeding back into the depressive cycle. The momentary escape these behaviors provide makes them dangerously addictive even as they sabotage any real progress toward healing. The professional toll of depression. As depression takes hold, your work life inevitably suffers through missed deadlines, difficulty concentrating, and increased absenteeism. The resulting job stress and potential financial consequences then become additional sources of anxiety that feed back into the depressive cycle. Many people trapped in this spiral don't realize their work struggles are symptoms rather than causes, outward manifestations of an internal biochemical imbalance caused by prolonged stress. The fear of professional consequences often becomes another weight dragging you deeper into depression, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy where work problems and depressive symptoms amplify each other. Losing sight of who you were. One of depression's most disorienting effects is the gradual erosion of your sense of self until you can no longer remember the person you were before depression took hold. Your interests, passions, and personality traits seem to fade into the background, replaced by a hollowed-out version of yourself going through the motions of living. This identity loss makes recovery seem impossible because you can't recall what normal felt like or imagine ever feeling that way again. Your memories become filtered through depression's dark lens, rewriting your personal history to match your current hopeless perspective. The body's rebellion against constant stress. The physical toll of chronic stress leading to depression extends to your immune system, which becomes weakened and dysregulated. Inflammation levels rise throughout your body while your ability to fight off infections decreases. Wounds heal more slowly, and you become susceptible to frequent colds and illnesses. This isn't just feeling run down, it's your entire system becoming compromised by the biochemical changes depression creates. Many people don't realize their constant physical ailments are actually symptoms of depression's far-reaching effects on the body's functioning. When anxiety and depression collide. For many people, stress doesn't lead cleanly to depression but instead creates an anxious-depressive hybrid where worry and hopelessness feed off each other. You may experience constant anxiety about your depressed state, fearing it will never improve, which then deepens the depression. This creates a tangled knot of symptoms where it becomes difficult to distinguish where anxiety ends and depression begins. The two conditions amplify each other, creating a particularly stubborn form of suffering that resists simple solutions and requires comprehensive treatment addressing both aspects. The breaking point of emotional exhaustion. There comes a point in depression's progression where even basic tasks feel overwhelmingly difficult. Showering, preparing meals, or answering emails become monumental challenges requiring more energy than you can muster. This isn't laziness, it's your nervous system's final surrender after being battered by constant stress for too long. Your emotional reserves are completely depleted, leaving you operating on empty with no apparent way to recharge. This level of exhaustion often becomes the turning point where people finally seek help, having reached the limits of what they can endure alone. Interrupting the descent into depression. Breaking free from depression's grip requires recognizing the early warning signs and taking proactive steps before the condition becomes severe. Simple interventions like establishing consistent sleep patterns, engaging in physical activity, and challenging negative thought patterns can help halt depression's progression. The earlier you act, the easier it is to reverse the neurological changes stress has created. Waiting until you've hit rock bottom makes recovery far more difficult, which is why understanding this gradual transition from stress to depression is so crucially important. When professional help becomes essential. There comes a point in depression's progression where professional intervention becomes necessary, when symptoms persist despite your best efforts, when hopelessness becomes overwhelming, or especially if you begin having thoughts of self-harm. Seeking therapy or considering medication isn't a sign of weakness but a recognition that your brain's chemistry has become dysregulated and needs expert help to recalibrate. A qualified mental health professional can provide evidence-based treatments that address both the biological and psychological aspects of depression, offering tools and strategies you couldn't access on your own. The path back to light. Recovering from stress-induced depression is rarely a straight line upward but rather a series of small steps forward with occasional setbacks. It requires patience with yourself as your brain gradually relearns how to function without constant stress responses. Combining professional treatment with lifestyle changes, social support, and self-care practices creates multiple pathways for healing. The neuroplasticity of your brain means it can reshape itself out of depressive patterns, though this takes time and consistent effort. Understanding that recovery is possible even when it doesn't feel that way provides a crucial lifeline during the darkest moments. Building resilience against future episodes. The ultimate protection against stress-induced depression lies in developing daily habits that bolster your mental resilience before crisis hits. This includes maintaining strong social connections, practicing stress management techniques, prioritizing sleep hygiene, and cultivating a balanced lifestyle that doesn't chronically overtax your system. Learning to recognize your personal warning signs allows for early intervention when stress begins accumulating. Viewing mental health as something to actively maintain rather than simply fix when broken transforms your relationship with stress and prevents many cases of depression before they start. Thank you, and let's stay connected. Thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery. If you found this video valuable, imagine what you'll learn next. Subscribe to Wisdom Forge and hit the bell icon so you never miss more thought-provoking content, practical wisdom for everyday life, the tools to unlock your full potential. Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your biggest takeaway or what topics you'd like to see next. Until next time, keep growing, keep learning.